like that. Very good. In fact, I appreciate that very much. It was my birthday week, so
Oh, that's right. That's right. Happy birthday.
well, I'm not advertising it for that, but thank you. But but yeah, the idea of Groundhog Day being in the same week as my birthday, that's what always cracks me up. It's like, oh,
Well, of course, we all could say from the course's perspective that practice, practice, practice makes perfect. And the Groundhog Day movie that so many of us love, it typifies the need for being patient and persistent and gentle with ourselves, just as Holy Spirit is, until we master the forgiveness classroom and recognize that it's all for our best interest. We're not asked to sacrifice anything, but we're really given everything. And we just need to practice that over and over and over again until the idea of grievances and separation and duality just becomes a silly, forgivable dream that we wake up from, right?
yes, and isn't it amazing? I'm sure that I don't know if it's Alan Reitman or who it was that made that movie, said that, wrote it and whatever. I should look at that because, it's really interesting to me the principles of A Course in Miracles that are so clear through the activities of the character who starts out being just a real not the kind of person you want to spend much time with, and who through lifetimes, literally, I think, I read somewhere it was like supposedly hundreds of years he was in that place. I don't know if that's the case, but we didn't get to see all of it, so thank God for that, or we'd be still sitting in the theater. But
A very extended Truman
but
Show. Yeah,
exactly. But it's like lifetimes of forgiveness lessons and learning what could be and couldn't be, and I mean, how many times he literally committed suicide in the dream,
hmm
in the day, and he came back the next day. He woke up, with that Sonny and Cher song playing on the radio. And
Yeah, exactly.
I got you, babe. And so yeah, I mean, and it's just such a great symbol because yeah, he had to learn how to be a good person. He had to learn how to be a loving person. He had to learn how to communicate with people that he thought, were not on his same level. He thought he was such a great, intelligent, brilliant guy, and everybody else around him was really just kind of less than. But he learned the value of all of them, and learn to literally love people in a town that he hated when he first came there. And so I mean, just the shift, and of course if we had that many lifetimes to do that in, oh, I guess we did. I guess we do. I guess we do.
And if it's all happening at once and duality is really a misperception, then we benefit from everyone's lifetime that is waking up. And because we're all in it together, because we are all together, because we are all the same and ultimately all one. And so, minds are joined, and what we seem to learn on our own, we're really learning and teaching for everyone. And
For
so,
everyone. Yeah.
yeah.
And with everyone, and
Mhm.
the joyful thing is that when you recognize those, you recognize, like you and me, how long ago did we recognize our value to each other?
Mhm.
And I mean, I'm probably overstating, how you feel about me, but I definitely have a great affection for you, and I'm proud to be your friend.
Oh,
Um,
likewise, of
oh gosh,
course. And yeah, I think just the fact that we, enjoy sharing this, and it deepens, what we are as individuals and also collectively as we share these right-minded ideas that really include everyone. It's not we're really abolishing specialness while we seem to be two individuals that are sharing things that we find meaningful, right?
Exactly, exactly. And just seeing, oh yeah, no, we are the same, and uh both very valuable, as is everyone else that was here, because I mean
Yeah, yeah,
that's our value. When I see your value, I see my value. When I see my value, I see your value. And that's, I think, what Helen and Bill are going through in this story that we're reading. They
hmm,
recognize the value of each other,
yeah,
and were therefore able to step aside and let this glorious thing come through them.
yep.
uh, and how grateful I am for that, man. So yay. So Bruce and I are reading Absence from Felicity. It's a book by Dr. Kenneth Wapnick, and it's about describing of the Course in Miracles with the major character of Helen Schuckman. So it's gone through their life, and uh, is uh, talking about how they came together and decided that each had a value and and strength, and they relied on each other for this. It's interesting to me. I don't really know. I guess I have read. I do have that biography of Bill. How much he was affected by Helen. We see that, from Helen's point of view, she's got a lot of dependence on Bill. She's learned a lot about herself from her in a relationship with Bill. For her, Bill was a true partner.
Hmm.
And I don't know how Bill saw Helen actually, and I'll have to go back and reread that
Yeah, never forget to laugh.
the
It's such a
Carol Howe book.
Carol Howe's book is a wonderful biography. As you mentioned, I'm thinking I'm probably due for a reread on that as well because there's a lot in there. I'm sure that relates to Helen, but I think reading through Absence from Felicity as we've been doing, it does seem like that Helen acknowledged the interrelationship and how they're both learning together, um, and to a very significant degree. And of course, Ken, I think because Ken's perspective on it is so immersed in the course's metaphysics, not that Carol's wasn't, but his perspective, I think, that gives the course's importance of relationships. It's really not the specific individuals again that are important, but how we relate to each other really takes us out of the tyranny of specialness and really leads us gently but firmly, as we practice to a place where we recognize the real beauty and the real strength and the real glorious innocence that we all have, are, and share. And but we do that by consistently looking at the blocks to the awareness of love's presence. Just like, I'm sure you've already been going over today's workbook lesson, but I could see peace in this situation, this specific thing, instead of what I now see in it, right? So we can replace feelings of depression, anxiety, or worry, or any thoughts about a particular situation, personality, or event with peace, right? So
Yeah, and
this is one of the lessons that Ken suggests. If you can only remember two lessons from the workbook, and you're stuck on a desert island, if you can memorize the titles to 5 and 34, you've got the whole course. I'm never upset for the reason I think. Number 5 and 34 is I could see peace instead of this.
yeah, no, I love this lesson, because it is so very clear that uh, it's my own thinking.
Hmm.
It's so clear that it's my own thinking.
Yeah.
And wow,
Yeah.
what a gift this is. And
Hmm.
I was going to also mention that there is another book that is uh, I'm looking it up right now. I'll put it on the camera so you can see.
Okay.
Kind of dark over here, but um, I don't know if you can see that.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
This is by a guy named Neil Vahle or Vahle.
I know of it, but I haven't read it. Yeah.
Yeah, so Course in Miracles, The Lives of Helen Schuckman and William Thetford. And I read this quite a while ago and it's kind of been through the muck. It's got some great pictures in it. I don't know if you can see pictures of Helen and
Oh yeah. There's a
Mhm.
lot of those on the acim.org website. It's one of
Mhm.
those I spent several years working with Tam Morgan and some other wonderful folks at the Foundation for Inner Peace a few years ago, redoing the website, which already had just loads of stuff in it. So we really didn't add. The main emphasis was really reformatting it rather than adding a ton of content. But the ton of content was already there. It's still, relatively hidden. It's not intentionally hidden. It's just that there's so much there, and people don't really take the time to go through, particularly a lot of the historical material, which is really interesting, and also kind of like what we're doing with Ken's biography of Helen. There's really a lot of course related stuff there if you're looking for it. But I encourage people to go through both the two. I think of them as the two sister organizations, facim.org, of course, with all of Ken and Gloria's work, and now Jeff Siebert and the other folks that are carrying on that work. But also acim.org, which is the Foundation for Inner Peace website, which publishes the course, of course. And on that website, there's just a wealth and depth and breadth of wonderful information that if you haven't explored it, I encourage everyone listening to do that, and also to support both organizations if you can, in whatever way you
Absolutely.
feel inspired. Yeah,
Yeah, I love that. I'm looking at this guy. He's written that Neil Volley has written books about the Unity movement, Charles Fillmore, Ernest Holmes, he Myrtle Fillmore. He's written books about all these people, and very interesting. I'll have to check into them. And this one here, is it available? I don't know that Course in Miracles book, but anyway. Oh yeah, buy it used for 38 bucks. Woohoo. Okay.
I think I just found it. Yeah, and on
Yeah.
on Amazon
Okay.
too. Yeah, yeah.
Well, I have a copy of it, so if you
Okay.
want, I'll send it to you.
Oh no, that's quite all right. I'm still a few years out on catching up on my course related reading. I've got to even after getting rid of 97% of my mom's metaphysical library and probably almost that much of my own before moving to Arizona. Um, I still have, a sizable bookcase of most of which are course-related books to go to go through. I've read probably half of them, but I still have a lot more to go through. Mostly Ken stuff that I've uh,
Oh my gosh.
gleaned from the facim.org, offerings. Yeah.
Yeah, he Ken was just a dynamo.
Oh, just incredible. Yeah. I mean, just this one book alone, just think, which is really, on its surface, it's a biography. So you think, oh, well, it's sort of somewhat peripheral to, the in-depth, solid, meat and potatoes core stuff. You think it's not really a side dish though, when you really read what's going on with Helen and the way Ken presents the biography and really gets into the depth and breadth of Helen's persona and what was behind that, and her resistance, again, that we've probably talked about every week since we started reading it, is really just a tremendously helpful reminder of our own, and to just notice that and see Helen and Bill and everyone who's studied the course, including Jesus and Buddha and Mary Magdalene, like in Gary Renard's fourth book, it illustrates. We're all working through all this stuff. Some have you know, completely dropped the ego, and or from the course's jargon at the top of the ladder. But in truth, we're already there. That's in a study group yesterday. A fellow course student reminded me, it's like, yeah, there's the ladder's a great metaphor, but we shouldn't forget that we're already home, and not to skip over steps, but just to keep in mind that the course's premise really depends on us, recognizing that, um, and forgiveness is completely contingent. The true forgiveness that the Course espouses is completely contingent on us recognizing that nothing happened in truth, and that we're hallucinating. And I'm and basically seeing what's invisible, um, as visible, and not seeing what's eternally visible, and has become invisible to us. So we've got everything backwards, as the Course reminds us in so many places, doesn't
Upside down and backwards.
it? Inside out and bass backwards,
Oh
exactly.
gosh.
Yeah.
Oh, but the thing is, you got that ladder wrong too, because it's actually horizontal. It's just laying flat.
Yeah, in terms of the effort, for sure. Yeah, it's well, if anything, it's a slide, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, and there's in some of Ken's a few of Ken's workshops, he actually inverts the chart and says it's instead of going up, you're going down, and he puts God, heaven, and non-duality at the bottom and inverse everything. But they obviously, you know, perfect for Australians and people in the southern hemisphere, right?
That's
But
right. That's right. And,
but
and then the
it's
other way to look at it
obviously
is
direction and orientation has no makes no appearance in pure non-duality, right?
absolutely, because
Yeah,
it's non-duality. There's
yeah,
no one or the other, and that's why it's more of a sphere. I think it's more of a sphere, and that we are going deeper in, and deeper out, farther
yeah,
out.
yeah.
We're like,
That's why I think that in the uh, lesson 23, that one line sentence that describes the three steps of forgiveness, which I like to think of as the three R's: reveal, release, and replace. I have to reveal to myself, when I'm projecting insanity, the ego insanity onto the world and everyone in it, and how ridiculous that is. That has not served me. And then which corresponds to lesson 5, and then lesson 34, today's lesson, synchronistically, is I could see peace instead of this guilt in my mind, right? This thought system of insanity in my mind. And then we recognize that I can release myself from that insanity, and then the replacement's automatic. But sometimes I'll use, instead of reveal, release, and replace, reframe. And the sphere metaphor you just were sharing is sort of like we're imploding the ego to nothing, which it always has been, and we're expanding the sphere, of light, if you will, as the Forgotten Song suggests at the end of that beautiful poetic narrative. A circle that embraces everyone and everything. And that's really when we reframe our identity to include everyone, um, then the idea of adversarial relationships becomes meaningless, because if we are all the same and our identity includes everyone that is the same as us, then essentially we're expanding that sphere or that frame to include everyone. And then it no longer becomes about, I need to fix the world, or give you, the advice you need for your correction, because it's my correction. Right.
that's right. That's
Yeah.
right. You don't have to say a thing because once you figure it out, it's done.
Yeah. And it's only from a pure non-dual standpoint that the statement, the sole responsibility of a course student or a miracle worker is to accept the atonement for themselves. Well, the self that we're addressing, of course, is the decision-making mind that needs to accept that identity as all-inclusive. And then once we've done that, we don't concern ourselves with the dream of separation and the seemingly separate parts that keep us hallucinating, right?
That's exactly right. And so what are we talking about? You know,
Oh, well, I think we were reading Helen's biography.
yes,
Should,
yes,
should we go back to that now that we've given a wonderful preamble for this week?
exactly. Everything. So yeah, so we've
Hopefully.
been okay, so this is it chapter 2 we're in now? Let's see.
We are in chapter 7,
So,
um,
chapter
and
7.
page 188 at the bottom of the page in the print version. And I see, looking at your shared screen,
Oh,
um,
I'm moving things around. Sorry.
yeah, it looks like
There we go.
there we go, page 170 of 492. That proportion, 36%, is probably more helpful for people looking at
Oh,
the digital version, right?
so yeah. So and it's great to have it in both ways. So
Yep.
all right. I think probably start incidentally, or do you want to go back? Um,
Why don't you just go ahead and start with incidentally, and then
okay, I think
you
we're
know,
good with that. So you
yeah,
want to
yeah.
start? You want to read?
Why don't you go ahead? Since I've
Okay.
been yakking a lot.
Great. Sure, yakety yak. Okay. Incidentally, Incidentally, it is important to point out here that the equation of the mind with the brain is a very common one. Ooh, this is really good. Made by almost all researchers, not to mention lay people. It becomes an important part of the course's theory that the mind is not in the body, though the brain most definitely is. Both brain and body remain projections of the illusory thought of separation that is contained in the separated mind. It is the mind, however, that is the decision maker. The brain merely carries out its directives. Excuse me. This is very interesting because we've been having a group that meets on Tuesday evenings, and this is one of the things that has been a real hot topic is this decision maker.
Uh-huh.
And of course, it's really only mentioned like one time in that particular term in the course, but it really is this function of the chooser,
Hmm.
the decision maker, the chooser, the one who makes the choice,
Yep.
who says, I could see peace instead of this, um, rather than, and so, and that is not in the brain, which this is
Exactly.
the thing that people get very, very confused about. I know it
Hmm.
confuses me if I think that what I am is in the brain, but what I am couldn't possibly be housed in that. And when
Hmm.
they used to say this, they don't know this now, they don't say this now, but they used to say this, maybe they still do, I don't know, that we only use 10% of our brain. And, I mean, they're so clueless as to actually the activities that were going on in the brain. But the mistake is believing that the thing that we do in the brain is thinking. The thinking
Hmm.
doesn't come from the brain.
Yeah. And I think another, a way to generalize that would be the course's perspective that the body exists in the mind, not the other way around. And the body, of
Yes.
course, includes the brain. So,
Yeah.
so there's nothing wrong with brain research. In fact, a lot of it's very fascinating. Case in point, my stroke of insight with Jill Bolte Taylor's story. It's just is a wonderful example of how we can use our mind to look at the brain and see how it really is just a mechanism by which we've imprisoned ourselves as identifying with a specific person. And yet we can do that without having a stroke. Kids, don't try this at home.
Yes.
Yeah. But the idea that the brain and the mind are the same is emphasized either a few places explicitly, but certainly many places explicitly in Ken Wapnick's work, and I think by the same token that his, even though the word decision maker, the phrase decision maker, is really only even just sort of somewhat almost indirectly referred to in the course with those particular words, the idea behind it is implicit. And I think it's part of Ken and Gloria's brilliance that because they both worked together with that idea. Initially, Ken was calling it Charlie the Chooser, and from what I understand, and then Gloria said, "Nah, let's give it a more respectable name. Let's call it the Decision Maker." And so thanks to Gloria, we have the term decision maker that runs through almost just about anything and everything that Ken Wapnick has done. If you read his wonderful books or listen to his wonderful audios or watch the videos, or any of the other work that he's done, it's just steeped in this idea of it. And on his beautiful metaphysical chart, it's represented as a blue dot at the top of toward the top of the chart, right below the line that is the pure non-duality is above that, and everything below that, of course, is illusory. But the blue dot is the the mechanism by which we choose against the ego, not in any combative way, but just by seeing its absurdity, quaint absurdity, as the course would put it, and then instead choosing the Holy Spirit, which is how we look without condemnation at the insanity of a dualistic dream and just see, that has never really served me. All that specialness, all those specific things that I've made into, big deals and issues and grievances, and keep wanting to fuss and fight about my limitations. like Richard Bach says, in his wonderful little Messiah's Handbook, argue for your limitations, and sure enough, they're yours. But we can unargue by seeing the absurdity in it, and that's where that practice comes in. But a lot Groundhog Day, over and over again, just looking at how crazy it is that we would want to have a special self that has special problems instead of listening to Holy Spirit's interpretation of everything that just watches and looks and condemns not. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, interprets not.
Yeah.
The Holy Spirit just doesn't even interpret what we see. I
Yep.
just posted this in the chat.
Oh,
This is
okay.
from lesson 92, which he talks extensively about. Our lesson 92 is actually called Miracles Are Seen in Light, and Light and Strength Are One. And he says, you also believe the body's brain can think. If you but understood the nature of thought, you could but laugh at this insane idea. It is
Mm-hmm.
as if you thought you held the match that lights the sun and gives it all its warmth, or that you held the world within your hand, securely bound until you let it go. Yet this is no more foolish than to believe the body's eyes can see, the brain can think.
Yep, yep.
So
Thank you for that. Yeah, I just looked up brain in the web edition, which is
that's where I
acim.org
got that
slash
from.
ACIM. And there's 6 instances of brain, 3 of which are in that lesson 92, which you just read. 2 others in the text, chapter 22, section 1. The brain cannot interpret what your vision sees, and then the brain interprets to the body of which it is a part. And then in chapter 13, the introduction, in the text, their minds seem to be trapped in their brains, and its powers to decline if their bodies are hurt. That's a particularly potent section and helpful one. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, there's so much about directly, not so much. Only 6 instances of the word brain, but the distinction is really obvious and clear in both the direct and many indirect references to the idea that the body can't possibly be our real identity, and our real identity must be the mind, that abstract uh, being that we all are drawn back to because we know that's where the peace lies. But we keep trying to have this dead horse puppet that we call the body be the repository of our identity, and it just it fails us at every turn, doesn't it?
Yeah, it can't possibly be. And you mentioned Jill Bolte Taylor, and that's a great. I've listened to her. I've read her books
Oh
and
yeah.
listened to her description of what happened when she had that stroke.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, you have to ask the question. She recognized she was having a stroke. She recognized she had to do certain things. She had to go do this, do that, and the other. The part of the brain that would have come up with solutions for that was the one that was being affected by the stroke and couldn't
Uh-huh.
possibly have come up with the solutions because it was inoperational. So
There you go.
who was it who was saying, pick up my business card and try to look at the numbers on there and match them to the numbers on the phone? Who was
Uh-huh.
it who was telling her to do that? Not her brain, which was severely malfunctioning.
Right,
It was
right.
It was her mind. The
Uh-huh.
mind is, and the mind is the one who looks at the brain, who gave the brain a name, who said, this is what I am. You
Hmm.
know, the mind knows that that's not what it is because it can look at it and touch it and talk about it. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, you don't touch your brain very often, but you could, you know, you can do things with it. Obviously, it's not what I am.
Exactly. And another example that I thank you for sharing that detail about Jill's story. And another example that comes to mind is one where I believe reading somewhere where there was I think it was a soldier that they did an autopsy on who was, very, high achieving, functional, well, maybe not high achieving, but anyway, but very functional person right up until their demise. And and then when they did an autopsy, they discovered that something like 90% of that person's brain, his brain was just like gone.
Hmm.
And he was able to do all these things, including, I think it was, you know, I don't recall the exact story, but if, you take away 80-90% of someone's brain, you think, well, gee, they've got to be a complete vegetable at best, right? But no, this person was fully functional, and no one suspected anything until they did this autopsy. So it's like, okay, so where does our identity really exist? Well, it can't be the body. I mean, the body is just one of the many scapegoats that we populate our dream with, and we just happen to have a very special one that we call our little s self, the body and its personality, and even that we got backwards, because it's the persona of the the specific sin, guilt, fear character that then says, "Oh, I need a body in order to make this thing work." You know,
Yeah.
yeah,
And without the body, what would you be?
yeah.
Without the brain, what would you be? You would still
Hmm.
be,
Yeah.
you
So
know.
so when this comes up sometimes too, I'll think of the wonderful little quote in that the Scarecrow makes in The Wizard of Oz, and actually it's Dorothy responding to the Scarecrow saying that he wants a brain, um, and so he can think, she, and Dorothy's response to the Scarecrow is, well, what would you do with a brain if you had one? And I love that, folks. And I always translate it to the course um, applicable version, which is, what would you do with a mind if you had one? Because that's kind of, I think that's sort of the the ever so gentle sarcasm that the course makes him on everyone's ego, and how it really lampoons the crazy idea that we all embrace, which is that we can be a thing that you know works independently of our real identity. And because our minds are so powerful, we're able to create these little puppets that we call bodies that have brains that can do these phenomenal things, but they're nothing compared to what our real identity is. But we're so far down the rabbit hole of that fantasy, that dream role that we've so thoroughly practiced and identified. Speaking of practice, that we don't even it doesn't even occur to us that gosh, I'm like on a giant Truman Show set here, and everyone in this movie I've put there, and they're fulfilling a script that I've signed off on, countless millions of years ago within the dream of time, and forgot about completely. And now I'm just going through the motions of this rerun, and I call it life. How bizarre is that? Huh?
Yeah, and the whole purpose of it is actually to remember that I'm not here. This is not true. This is not the true man show. This
Mm. Exactly. Yeah, that was a good choice of names, wasn't it?
I know well, I'm sure that was purposeful too. So
Uh-huh.
so yeah, but that I mean that's it. We're confused about who and what we are, and so all of these all the work that we do, and today's lesson is a huge one that says I have a mind, and that mind can actually work to tell me what's true about what's happening here, rather than the the brain and the body, which are in reactive mode, which I mean, that's the ego. The brain and the body are the ego.
Hmm.
They're in reactive mode. They see a thing and come up with a history and a conclusion, a story, an idea, reaction, action, whatever. All of these things are coming about because the body and the brain, the ego, um, are acting out. They're playing their part. But I have a mind, and the mind can actually override the body and the brain. The
Hmm.
mind
Hmm.
can override all of these things because I'm actually able to choose to use the mind that I have rather than to be dragged around by the script that, yes, I'm a part of, I wrote the script. I made the Bruce and the Lynn, so that we can interact in this way this day. That was the whole purpose of it. If I recognize that's the purpose of this. The purpose of this is not for me to have to my independent life gone out doing the things I do, you doing the things you do. The purpose of what we're doing is to remind ourselves of the reality of ourself, what we truly are. And so we come together to remind ourselves over and over and over. And it's not because we're stupid and don't understand. It's because the ego, the brain and the body, uh, the story, the script are all very pervasive and have been very good at keeping the secret of who I really am.
Hmm.
I mean, because if you really, it's like that you go to the magic show and you watch, that there's no real magic going on there. You know that there is an actual trick that's being done, that there's a sleight of hand, that there are mirrors, there are all these different things. You go there knowing that, and you get excited because you want to be fooled, and you are fooled, and people figure out, how can I figure out how this guy did this. I watch Penn and Teller. They have a show where they are trying to figure out how other magicians are doing things, and that's it. It's all a magic show, but the reality of it is none of that's actually happening. It's just a trick, and
The
it's
sleight of
this
hand, a vast illusion, is the
a
course,
sleight of hand, a vast illusion. Exactly.
which is how the course describes
So
time, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
Jesus knew. He
Yep.
was
He probably
absolutely,
did a few magic tricks on his own just to convince himself that that wasn't where it was at, right?
yeah, more than likely. So yeah, that's um that's what we're doing here, is we're looking for the trick.
Yeah. Yeah. And what are you gonna do with that much wine, fish, and bread anyway? I mean, it's like, enough's enough, right?
I know it, man. Those are pretty good tricks.
Yeah.
Whatever that was pretty darn good. And of course, obviously Jesus not believing the reality of the dream or the story could manipulate it in any way that he wanted to, just as we could if we were not convinced that it was true. We could walk on water. We could, I wouldn't make wine because I'm not really into that, but you know,
No, but we're all into wine. We
wine, yeah.
we drink a lot of wine ideas as egos, right?
Maybe Snapple or something. And they'd all be whining.
Really. Should
Whining.
I read on?
Yes, please.
Okay. And I need to leave another 5 or so minutes early
Okay.
again today for similar reasons as
All
last week,
right.
with
You can,
helping out with the
okay. Okay.
class
All right.
at 9:30. Okay, so let's see. We're at Jesus
Jesus now.
now returns to Helen, and we've returned to the top of page 189, the print version. Jesus now returns to Helen. The crown that is mentioned is symbolic of Helen's true identity, which was symbolized in her earlier visions by the figure of the priestess. And then now here's Helen's comments. You cannot, emphasis with cannot in italics, lose your crown. I may have to keep it for you again again in italics, but that will always, in italics, be because you threw it away. Free will is terribly misunderstood, and people keep misunderstanding because of projection. They even blame themselves and each other for my, capital M, my crucifixion. And then in brackets, Ken has sick. He must have added that. Because Helen misspelled crucifixion. But that's okay. I misspell it as Brucifixion, which I think is helpful for me, which I assure you was done because of my perfectly free will. And my, again, is capitalized. So, here obviously she's channeling Jesus, basically saying, okay, yeah, you've got this all wrong. We're terribly misunderstanding. And I'm going to pause just for a moment to share something I'm pretty sure I've shared with you before, and I know on a number of other online course related venues. And that is when I was reading Baird Spalding's, actually, so I think it was six, ended up being 6 volumes altogether, but the 5 that I was familiar with as a teenager, The Life and Teachings of the Masters of the Far East. I remember even making a book report for my high school English class on those books, and the teacher was like, "Whoa, what is this all about?" But one of the things that really stuck with me in that series of books was where Jesus appeared along with Buddha and several other enlightened masters to this party that were in India and Tibet and the Himalayas and Nepal, I guess that part of the world anyway. Um, and he appeared to this party, as in person, kind of like Art and Persa appeared to Gary Renard, purportedly, and he said, I was I'm paraphrasing now, terribly misquoted um, by having the Bible having said that I said, "My God, why hast thou forsaken me?" And in this account in Baird Spalding's book, he says, what I really said was, "My God, you have never forsaken me, nor any of your children," meaning, all of us. So it's like, okay, we're trying to blame our our Creator with a capital C, and the only thing that really is suspect is the little g god of the ego, which deifies sin, guilt, and fear. So we just need to just drop that insanity from the throne of our mind, that blue dot again, the decision maker, and and all will be well. Not necessarily within the dream, because the dream doesn't need repair. It just needs to be woken up from, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
it's so interesting you mentioned that quote because someone was just mentioning that quote yesterday and saying,
Yeah.
uh, how, he supposedly said that, and then he supposedly said, Father, into your hands I commend my spirit. He also supposedly said things. He had conversations with the other two guys that were up there getting crucified next to him.
There was a Monty Python troupe, I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like they had conversations going on up there.
He was saying always look on the bright side of life,
Yeah,
things like that.
exactly. And it's hard for me to believe, unless he had a microphone system or something, somebody up in that kind of place who was so weakened from having gone through all this physical trauma and is, hanging, I mean, in that position and whatever, that they would say things loud enough that people in a noisy crowd would be able to make out the words. And just like the Monty Python thing.
Well, I think there's some. I mean, while on the surface it appears horribly sacrilegious in some places, I think there's so much wisdom in that little parody of the serious formal religion, not just Christianity, but taking everything about duality seriously. Although all that doesn't purport to be that, it does a pretty good job in several places in that wonderful Life of Brian movie. And one of them is at Golgotha, the where in this case Brian was hanging on the cross, as a representative of that story. The Roman soldiers saying, okay, which one of the the king has pardoned, the emperor has pardoned Brian. Which one of you is Brian? And before Brian can answer, several other people say, "No, I'm Brian. I'm Brian." And then another fellow part of my Python troop says, "No, I'm Brian, and so is my wife."
We're
But
all
that's
Brian.
I think that's kind of a reminder that, yeah, we're all unjustly accused and crucified by the ego. It's like, I mean, if you want to read it that way, anyway, that's how I kind of like try
I
try
think,
to
yeah,
try to look at movies and say, well, if we're gently lampooning the ego, and not really true, no real identity has been harmed, but the Holy Spirit, lampoons everyone's identification with the ego. It's just a silly choice of that little tiny switch in the blue dot in Ken's chart. That's at the right below, the purple line that is above, which is pure non-duality, which we don't know about, uh, but we're drawn to. But that our emphasis should be getting back to the mind with Holy Spirit's help, and then getting to that decision-making place in our mind where we can look without condemnation. That's why, the in page 401 in the print version, the first of the what is of what is forgiveness says, forgiveness looks and waits and judges not. It is incapable of condemnation. True forgiveness is incapable of condemning us to the silliness of duality and individuality. And so I think the word individuality has got a big clue in it, with duality in it.
I know. I
Yeah.
love it. I mean, this course was made for the English language. I guarantee you that because,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I don't know how it is in other languages, but the double entendres of some of these words that are used
Yeah.
is so perfect. It's just like,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, it's right there in the word.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, individuality, undividability. Um, okay, so let's see.
So I don't think I actually finished
No,
Helen's
you
comments
didn't.
there. Should I? So let's see. Which I sure was done because of my perfectly free will. Again, and then it's Helen writes, "You are supposed to be perfect, even as your Father in heaven is perfect. He made you that way." So again, there's the non-dual metaphysics. The perfection that is our real identity, that was created by our Creator as one being, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, right? um, yeah, is perfect. Hold on, I need to take this call. Thanks.
Okay, I'll just read while you take a call. So Ken continues. In A Course in Miracles itself, Jesus would have corrected the last statement to read, quote, He created you that way, which the difference between making and creating is pretty profound in the Course. So Ken continues. The final part of this October 18 note is a plea from Helen to her colleague David Diamond, who was in a coma and dying. I shall discuss Dave when we consider the notes of October 20th. I simply present the passage now in which Helen talks to Dave in her mind. Helen, Dave, just remember not to be condemnatory in any way and help if you can. X and Dave couldn't work it out this time, but they will. Jesus, be grateful you and Bill are ready now. Amen. And then Ken says, and that's interesting that Helen had a conversation in her mind with this guy Dave and says, don't condemn and help and be helpful, that you will work it out later. So then Ken says, we now move to the notes from October 19th. Helen begins. I think there is an error about this not noticing and not remembering names, etc. I don't think it's only or even primarily projection. It may be more a fear of involvement or interaction due to an interpretation of interaction as one alone and the other subservient, or one getting by the other losing. You avoid this if you don't meet or even see So she's talking about not noticing and remembering names, and that is a fear of involvement uh, due to an interpretation of interaction as one alone and the other subservient, or one getting by, the other losing. If you avoid this, you don't meet or even see. Interesting. I don't know if Bruce is back yet, but
I am. Yeah.
I'd love
I
to hear
just,
your comment on that.
yeah. I'm just going to kind of recap real quick. Yeah. Prim Primarily projection. Well, the word projection to me is just such a potent word in the course because literally we're projecting an entire universe. I mean, from the course's perspective, that's pretty staggering. Speaking of the power of the mind, like we were talking about with, the brain mind thing, our brains are, impressive enough, but the mind, when we really consider that it's putting on at the rate of probably 10 to the 44th frames per second, a holographic movie that extends beyond galaxies we can't even number, measure, or observe. It's like, and the minutia is, so far the other direction that we can't detect it, let alone understand its workings either. It's like, and then we think we have a few things figured out here in the middle, in the tiny little infinitesimal portion of the whole cosmic dream, but we've forgotten that it's a dream. I mean, that's how staggering our mind really is. Um, it's just, you know, ego mind blowing, shall we say.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's just the just recognizing even our nighttime dreams. It's easy for us to say, well, that was a dream. Um, but when we go to sleep at night and we look back on the day, does our mind say, well, that was a dream?
Hmm.
Because it's dreaming all the time. Interesting.
Yeah.
Um, let's see. So you got a couple more minutes. You want to read the next like paragraph or two?
Actually, I probably should just wrap it up here,
Just
and then
just look.
and then
Okay.
we'll yeah we can pick up here next week. But
All
yeah,
right,
I'll
that's
just
what I'm
just a
going to do.
just a quick comment. The other word that jumps out at me is interpretation, and I think that's such a helpful um, word. That everything that we think is real here is really just an interpretation of neutral data. Yeah. So anyway,
Yeah.
I'm going to scoot along, and thank you always, Lynn, as always, for wonderful conversations, and looking forward to the one next week. And
Thank you so much, Bruce. I love you,
love to all.
brother. I'm so
Likewise.
grateful for you.
Likewise. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and stop.